The space around Kepler-440c burned with weapon fire. Red and blue energy beams cut through the darkness between the stars. Jake Morrison gripped the controls of his fighter as another explosion lit up the void nearby. His hands were steady, but his heart was racing. 3 years of war had taught him to stay calm when death was this close. "Viper 6, you have 3 bogeys on your tail," Lisa Hayes said through the radio. Her voice was clear and strong, even as her own fighter spun away from enemy fire. "I'm coming around to help." Jake pulled his ship into a tight turn, feeling the heavy pull of gravity push him back into his seat. The enemy ships followed him like angry wasps. These were Scifi fighters, sleek and deadly, painted the dark green of their war fleet. They moved fast and shot faster. One wrong move and he would be space dust. Negative. "Viper 7, Jake said back to Lisa. "Stay with the convoy. Those transport ships need cover more than I do." Behind them, a line of large ships carried thousands of people away from the battle zone, families, children, old people, who just wanted to live in peace. The Scifi had attacked their colony without warning. Now these ships were all that stood between those people and slavery or death. Jake rolled his fighter to the left as green fire cut through the space where he had been a second before. His ship shook as the energy passed close by. Too close. He could smell burned metal in the air. One of those shots had found something important. The Scifi had been fighting humans for 5 years now. Nobody really remembered how it started. Anymore? Some said it was about mining rights on a dead world. Others claimed the aliens attacked first because they thought humans were weak. Jake did not care about the politics. He just knew that when they came for innocent people, someone had to stop them. "Jake, your engine is leaking plasma," Lisa said. Her fighter swept past his view, chasing 2 enemy ships away from the transports. "You need to get out of there." He looked at his instruments. She was right. The main engine was losing power fast. Red warning lights flashed across his control panel like angry eyes. His ship was dying under him, and there was nothing he could do to fix it here. "All Viper units, this is Control," a new voice said on the radio. It was Major Foster, their squadron leader. "We're pulling back." Pete, all fighters returned to base now. Jake wanted to argue, but he could see why. Half their fighters were gone already. The transport ships were almost to the jump point where they could escape to safety. The mission was done. It was time to go home. But his ship had other ideas. The engine coughed once and then went silent. Jake felt his stomach drop as the fighter started to fall toward the planet below. The artificial gravity was gone too. Everything not tied down began to float around the small cabin. "Mayday, mayday," he said into his radio. "Viper 6 is going down. Engine failure. I'm heading for the planet's surface." "Jake, no." Lisa's voice came through clear and strong. "Hold on, I'm coming to get you." He watched her fighter turn away from the fleeing transports and come toward him. It was the brave thing to do. It was also the wrong thing to do. 3 Scifi ships saw her coming and moved to cut her off. They wanted an easy kill, and she was giving them one. "Lisa, get out of here," Jake said. "That's an order." "Since when do corporals take orders from lieutenants?" she said back. There was a laugh in her voice, even as enemy fire started to reach for her ship. Jake tried to restart his engine, but it was completely dead. The planet was getting bigger below him. Kepler-442c was not a nice world. The report said it had a breathable atmosphere, but the weather was bad and the animals were worse. Not the kind of place you wanted to crash land. Lisa's fighter danced between the enemy shots like a bird in a storm. She was one of the best pilots Jake had ever seen. For a moment, he thought she might make it. Then green fire found her left wing and tore it apart. Her ship spun out of control, trailing metal and plasma behind it. "Lisa," Jake called out, but there was no answer. Her fighter fell toward the planet just like his was doing. They were both going down, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. The other human fighters were too far away to help. Transports were already jumping to safety. Even if Major Foster wanted to send a rescue mission, it would take days to organize. By then, Jake and Lisa would either be dead or prisoners of war. Jake strapped himself in tight and tried to aim his fighter toward what looked like a forest. Trees were better than rocks for a crash landing. Maybe the air around his ship started to glow red as it hit the atmosphere. The whole fighter shook like it was being torn apart by giant hands. His radio was full of static now. The last thing he heard was Major Foster's voice saying something about search and rescue. Then the radio went dead and Jake was alone with the screaming wind and the ground rushing up to meet him. The forest was huge and green and full of trees taller than buildings. Jake pulled up as much as his broken ship would let him. The first treetops hit his fighter like a giant fist. Metal screamed and glass broke. Then he was falling through branches and leaves, his world spinning end over end. The crash was like being inside an explosion. Everything went white and loud, and then suddenly very quiet. Jake hung upside down in his straps, blood running down his face. But he was alive. Somehow, against all the odds, he was still alive. Outside his broken window, he could hear strange sounds, animal calls that did not sound like anything from Earth. This was Kepler-4 for to see, and now it was his prison. Somewhere out there, Lisa might be alive too, or she might be dead. He would not know until he found her. Jake reached for his survival pack and tried to remember everything he had learned about staying alive in hostile territory. The war had followed him down from the stars, but now it was just him against an alien world that wanted to kill him. Jake woke up in pain. His head felt like someone had hit it with a hammer, and his left arm was not working right. The fighter's cockpit was crushed around him like a metal cage. Broken glass covered everything and smoke filled the air with a bitter smell. He managed to cut himself free from the safety straps and crawl out through the smashed canopy. The wreckage of his ship was scattered across a clearing in the alien forest. Pieces of metal and plastic hung from the trees like strange fruit. His emergency beacon was completely destroyed. Crushed under a chunk of the engine housing, the first thing Jake noticed was the air. It was thick and humid, like breathing soup. The gravity felt heavier than Earth normal too. Every step took more effort than it should. The trees around him were massive, their trunks wider than houses, and their leaves a dark purple color that looked almost black in the filtered sunlight. He found his survival pack in the wreckage and checked what he had. Water for 5 days, food bars for a week, basic medical supplies, and his sidearm with 2 spare power cells. Not much to live on in an alien wilderness. His environmental suit was damaged but still working. The small computer on his wrist showed the outside air was breathable but warned about unknown biological hazards. Jake started walking. He had no idea where he was going, but staying with the wreck was not an option. The crash site was too open and too obvious. If any Scifi forces were looking for survivors, they would find him here. He needed shelter, and he needed to find Lisa. The forest was alive with sounds he had never heard before. Strange calls echoed through the trees, some high and musical, others low and threatening. Things moved in the shadows between the massive trunks. Jake kept his weapon ready but did not shoot. He had limited power and no way to recharge. Every shot had to count. On the second day, he found Lisa's crash site. Her fighter had hit the trees at a bad angle and burned when it hit the ground. There was nothing left but twisted metal and ash. Jake searched through the wreckage for hours, but found no sign of her body. Maybe she had survived and walked away. Maybe the fire had left nothing to find. You would never know. The nights on Kepler-4 for to see were worse than the days. The temperature dropped fast when the sun went down, and his damaged suit could barely keep him warm. Strange lights moved through the darkness between the trees. Some looked like eyes watching him. Others moved in patterns that seemed organized to be natural. By the third night, Jake was getting desperate. His water was running low, and he had not found any safe source to refill from. The local plants looked poisonous, and the few streams he had found smelled like chemicals. His suit's radiation detector kept clicking whenever he got near water, warning him to stay away. That was when he found the caves. They were cut into a rocky hill that rose up from the forest floor like a stone island. The entrance was narrow, but opened into a larger chamber inside. Jake's flashlight showed the walls were covered with strange markings, like writing, but not in any language he knew. The air inside was warm and dry, a relief after days in the humid forest. He was setting up his small camp when he heard the footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, coming from deeper in the cave system. Jake grabbed his weapon and pointed it toward the sound. His heart was beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. The thing that came out of the shadows was his worst nightmare, Scifi. Warrior, tall and lean, covered in the flexible armor they wore into battle. Its skin was gray-green and rough like tree bark. Four arms moved with predatory grace, each hand ending in claws that could tear through steel. The alien's head was long and narrow, with large eyes that reflected his flashlight beam like mirrors. For a moment, neither of them moved. Jake had seen Scifi before, but only in combat footage and intelligence briefings. Up close, the alien was even more frightening. It was built for war, every part of its body designed to kill efficiently. The Scifi spoke first. Its voice a harsh whisper that seemed to come from deep in its chest. "Human," it said in broken English. "You die here." Jake did not answer. He just pulled the trigger. The energy bolt hit the alien in the chest and knocked it backward. But the Scifi armor absorbed most of the impact. The creature recovered quickly and charged at him with a roar that shook dust from the cave ceiling. Jake rolled to the side and fired again. This shot caught the alien in the shoulder, spinning it around, but it kept coming. The Scifi was fast. Faster than anything that big should be. Its claws raked across Jake's chest, tearing through his suit and drawing blood. They fought like animals in the narrow cave. Jake used his smaller size to stay away from those deadly claws, while the Scifi used its reach and strength to try to corner him. The alien's armor was tough, but Jake's energy weapon could hurt it. Each shot left a burned mark on the dark material. The fight ended when they both went down together. Jake's weapon was empty, and the Scifi was bleeding from multiple wounds. They lay on the cave floor, gasping for air, neither able to continue. That was when they heard the rumbling from outside. The cave entrance was collapsing. Their battle had weakened the rocks somehow, and now tons of stone were falling to block the way out. Jake tried to run for the opening, but it was too late. The last light from outside disappeared behind a wall of fallen rocks. The Scifi warrior pushed itself up on its hands and looked at the blocked entrance. It said something in its own language, a string of harsh sounds that might have been cursing. "Ain't." Then it looked at Jake and spoke in English again. "Trapped," it said, "both trapped." Jake checked his weapon, completely drained. He looked at the alien warrior who was now sitting against the cave wall, holding one of its wounded arms. They were enemies. They had just tried to kill each other. Now they were both prisoners of the same stone walls. Outside the cave, something was happening. Jake could hear a sound like wind, but wrong somehow. His suit's sensors were going crazy, detecting radiation levels that would kill him in minutes. Some kind of storm was passing over the area, the kind that made this planet so dangerous. The Scifi warrior seemed to understand what was happening too. It spoke again, quieter this time. "Storm," it said. "Stay here or we die." Jake sat down on the opposite side of the cave, as far from the alien as he could get. His flashlight was running low, but he could still see those reflective eyes watching him. Neither of them was going anywhere soon. The question was whether they would kill each other before they found a way out, or whether they would die together in this stone tomb. The alien warrior spoke one more time before the silence took over. "I am Kethfer," it said. "You are." Jake did not answer, but he thought about it. They might be stuck here for a long time. And despite everything, the alien had told him its name. It had to mean something. "Jake," he said finally. "My name is Jake." The Scifi nodded once and settled back against the wall. Outside, the storm raged on. The storm outside lasted for 2 days. Jake and Kethfer sat in the dark cave, watching each other like wild animals. Neither slept much, neither trusted the other enough to close their eyes for long. Jake's flashlight died on the first night, leaving them in complete darkness except for the soft glow from Kethfer's armor displays. When Jake's water ran out, Kethfer surprised him. The alien warrior pulled a container from his gear and rolled it across the cave floor. Jake caught it and sniffed the contents. It smelled strange, but his suit's scanner said it was safe to drink. He took a small sip. It tasted like metal and salt, but it was water. Why? Jake asked. Kethfer's eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. Dead human is no use, the alien said in his broken English. Need you alive to move rocks? Jake understood. The cave entrance was blocked by huge stones, some bigger than a man. Jake was smaller and could fit into tight spaces. Kethfer was strong enough to lift the heavy pieces. Neither could escape alone. They started working together when the storm ended. It was not friendship. It was not even cooperation. It was just two soldiers who wanted to live. Jake would crawl into the gaps between the fallen rocks and tie cables around the smaller stones. Then Kethfer would pull them out with his superior strength. It took 3 days to clear enough space for them to squeeze through. By then, they had developed a system of communication that was part English, part Scifi, and part pointing at things. Jake learned that Kethfer's ship had crashed 2 miles away. The alien's distress beacon was also destroyed. No rescue, Kethfer said. When they finally stood outside the cave, both sides think we are dead. Jake nodded. It made sense. The battle had been chaos. Hundreds of ships fighting across thousands of miles of space. 2 crashed fighters would be easy to miss, especially on a planet that no one wanted to visit. Anyway, the forest around them had changed during the storm. Many of the huge trees were broken or uprooted. New streams ran where none had been before, and there were sounds in the distance that Jake had not heard before. Deep roars that seemed to come from very large animals. Dangerous now, Kethfer said, listening to the sounds. Storm brings the big hunters out. They moved carefully through the damaged forest. Kethfer took the lead because his armor had better sensors. Jake followed, carrying what remained of his supplies. Neither spoke much, but they both understood that the rules had changed. The forest was more dangerous than their mutual hatred. On the 4th day after the storm, they saw their first big predator. It was like a bear but larger, with 6 legs and a mouth full of teeth that looked like knives. The creature stood 10 feet tall, and its fur was the same dark purple as the tree. Leaves. It was feeding on something that might once have been alive. Kethfer held up one hand, and they both froze. The alien warrior pointed to a path that would take them around the feeding creature. They moved like ghosts, careful not to make any sound. The predator never looked up from its meal. That night, they made camp in the shelter of a fallen tree. Jake tried to start a fire, but Kethfer stopped him. Fire brings them, the alien explained. Smell the smoke from far away. Instead, Kethfer activated a small heating unit from his gear. It gave off warmth, but no light or smoke. They shared the heat, sitting closer together than either liked, but understanding that staying warm was more important than comfort. Jake was surprised when Kethfer offered him food. It was some kind of pressed bar that tasted like meat and spices. It's not good, but better than Jake's remaining supplies. In return, Jake shared his water purification tablets. Kethfer's water was safe for humans, but it tasted terrible. The tablets made it better. You have family? Kethfer asked suddenly. His English was getting better from listening to Jake talk. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Talking about home felt wrong with an enemy, but they were no longer fighting each other. The planet was their enemy now, Sister Jake said finally. Younger, she builds things. Machines. Kethfer made a sound that might have been understanding. I have mate, 2 cubs, small ones. Jake looked at the alien warrior with new eyes. Kethfer was not just a soldier. He was someone's husband and father. The war had made it easy to think of the Scifi as monsters, but monsters did not have families they loved. The next morning brought new dangers. They were crossing a stream when something attacked from the water. It looked like a snake, but it was as thick as a tree trunk and covered in scales that looked like metal. Its mouth was big enough to swallow a man whole. Jake emptied his recharged weapon into the creature's head, while Kethfer used his claws to tear at its body. The thing thrashed and screamed, spraying them both with foul-smelling blood. Finally died. They were both wounded and exhausted. Kethfer had deep cuts on his arms and chest. Jake's leg was twisted from when the creature had grabbed him. They helped each other to the other side of the stream and found shelter in a grove of smaller trees. "This is bad," Jake said, looking at Kethfer's wounds. "You need medical attention." Kethfer pulled out a small device from his armor. It looked like a medical scanner. He ran it over his injuries and then over Jake's twisted leg. The device made soft beeping sounds. "Scifi medicine," the alien said. He took out a small tube and squeezed clear gel onto his cuts. The bleeding stopped immediately. Then he offered the tube to Jake. Jake hesitated. Alien medicine on a human body could be dangerous. But his leg was getting worse, and they had no other options. He squeezed the gel onto his injury and felt immediate relief. The pain faded, and his leg started to feel stronger. "Thank you, Jake," said Kethfer and nodded. "You saved my life at the water. I save yours now. We are equal." That night, Jake told Kethfer about his sister back on Earth, how she had built her first robot when she was 12, how she wanted to design ships that could travel between stars without weapons. Kethfer listened and asked questions that showed he understood more than his broken English suggested in return. Kethfer told Jake about his family. His mate was a teacher who worked with young Scifi. His cubs were learning to hunt and fight, but they also learned poetry and music. The alien warrior's voice grew soft when he talked about them. "War is wrong," Kethfer said suddenly. "Humans and Scifi are not so different." Jake agreed, but he did not say it out loud. The kind of thinking was dangerous for a soldier. But as he watched Kethfer tend to his wounds with careful hands, Jake realized that the alien was not his enemy anymore. They were just two people trying to survive on a world that wanted to kill them both. 3 weeks later, they had learned to work together like a team. Jake's human creativity found solutions to problems that Kethfer's warrior training could not handle. The alien's strength and fighting skills kept them alive when the predators came hunting. They had built a secure shelter, mapped the safest paths through their territory, and developed hunting techniques that used both their strengths. They were no longer Jake the human and Kethfer the Scifi. They were partners in survival. Neither of them talked about what would happen if rescue came. That was a problem for another day. For now, they had each other, and that was enough. 2 months on, Kepler 440C had changed both Jake and Kethfer. They moved through the forest like they had been born there. Their shelter was hidden in a cluster of thick trees, built with walls of woven branches and a roof that kept out the rain. Inside, they had stored enough food and water to last through the worst storms. Jake had learned to read the signs that warned of dangerous weather, the way certain birds stopped singing, how the air smelled different before the radiation storms. Kethfer had taught him which plants were safe to eat, and which ones would kill him in minutes. The alien warrior was a better teacher than Jake had expected. Their language had grown too. It was no longer the broken mix of English and Scifi they had started with. Now they could talk about complex ideas, share memories, even argue about things that had nothing to do with survival. Jake found himself looking forward to their evening conversations by the small heating unit. "On my world," Kethfer said one night, "the young ones learn the old songs before they learn to fight. Music teaches discipline, teaches patience." Jake listened as Kethfer hummed something low and haunting. The alien's voice was rougher than a human's, but there was beauty in it. When the song ended, Jake found himself wanting to hear more. "We have music too," Jake said. "My sister plays an instrument called a piano, makes sounds like water flowing over stones." Kethfer's eyes reflected the light from his armor displays. "You miss her much." "Every day," Jake admitted. She was going to college when I joined the military, wanted to build peaceful things instead of weapons. I always thought that was naive." "Maybe she was right," Kethfer said quietly. "Maybe we are the naive ones, thinking war solves anything." Jake had been thinking the same thing, but hearing it from a Scifi warrior made it feel more real. They sat in comfortable silence, both lost in thoughts of home. The peace was broken 3 days later when they heard the crash. It came from the north, the sound of metal hitting trees at high speed. Jake and Kethfer looked at each other and understood without words. Another ship had gone down. They found the wreckage by following the smoke. It was a Scifi supply ship, smaller than a fighter, but bigger than Jake's crashed scout. 2 figures moved in the clearing around the wreck. Both were alive, and both were armed. Jake stayed hidden in the trees while Kethfer approached his own people. Jake could not understand the rapid Scifi conversation, but he could tell from the body language that something was wrong. The two survivors kept pointing in his direction, even though they could not see him. Then the shouting started. One of the Scifi, taller than Kethfer and wearing officer markings, raised his weapon. Jake could see Kethfer step back, his hands raised but not in surrender. In warning, no, Kethfer said in English, loud enough for Jake to hear. Human is not enemy now. The officer responded in harsh Scifi that sounded like cursing. The other survivor, a younger warrior, moved to flank Kethfer. Jake realized what was happening. They wanted Kethfer to kill him to prove his loyalty. Come out, human, the officer called in accented English. Come out and die with honor. Jake stepped into the clearing with his hands visible, but ready to draw his weapon. The two new Scifi were different from Kethfer. Their armor was newer, their weapons more advanced. They looked at Jake like he was something disgusting they had found under a rock. I am Sub-Commander Velthor, the tall one said. Warrior. Beside me is Quindel. You will kneel and prepare for execution. No, Kethfer said, stepping between them. The human has fought beside me. He has earned the right to live. Velthar made a sound of disgust. You have been infected by human weakness, Kethfer. 2 months alone, and you forget who you are? I remember exactly who I am, Kethfer replied. I am a warrior who keeps his word. This human saved my life. I owe him a debt. The only debt you owe is to the Empire, Velthor snapped. Kill the human, or be branded a traitor. Jake watched the argument and felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had known this moment would come eventually. Kethfer would have to choose between his own people and their friendship. No warrior could choose against his own species and keep his honor. But Kethfer surprised him. The alien warrior drew his claws and faced his fellow Scifi. The human is under my protection. Anyone who wants to harm him must go through me first. Velthor's eyes went wide. You would fight your own kind for this creature? I would fight anyone who threatens my battle brother, Kethfer said. The words were formal, ritual. Jake did not understand their full meaning, but he could hear the weight they carried. Velthor and Quindel attacked without warning. They moved like dancers, their 4 arms working together to create a storm of claws and strikes. Kethfer met them with equal grace, but he was outnumbered. Jake drew his weapon and joined the fight. The battle was brutal and fast. Jake's energy bolts forced Quindel to split his attention between 2 enemies. Kethvar used the distraction to land several deep cuts on Velthor. But the sub-commander was skilled and experienced. His claws found gaps in Kethvar's armor. Jake saw Velthor preparing for a killing blow and did not think. He threw himself between the 2 aliens, taking the strike meant for Kethvar. Pain exploded across his chest as claws tore through his suit and into his flesh. But the move gave Kethvar the opening he needed. Kethvar's claws found Velthor's throat. The sub-commander died quickly, his eyes still wide with shock. Quindel tried to continue fighting, but he was badly wounded. Jake's weapon put him down with a clean shot to the center of mass. Jake collapsed, blood soaking through his torn suit. Kethvar knelt beside him, his own wounds forgotten. The alien's hands were gentle as he examined Jake's injuries. Why did you do that? Kethvar asked. I could have handled him. Because you are my friend, Jake said through gritted teeth.
Ace.
Friends protect each other. Kethvar was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, sadder. I can never go home now. My own people will hunt me as a traitor. Jake tried to sit up, but the pain was too much. I am sorry. It's my fault. No, Kethvar said firmly. This is the fault of a war that makes enemies of people who should be friends. You did not start this war, and neither did I, but maybe we can help end it. Kethvar used his medical supplies to treat Jake's wounds. The alien medicine worked faster than human drugs. Within an hour, Jake was able to walk again. They buried Velthar and Quindel in the forest, marking their graves with stones in the Scifi way. That night, they sat by their heating unit and talked about things they had never discussed before. Kethvar told Jake about the Scifi concept. of battle brothers, warriors who had fought together and saved each other's lives. It was a bond stronger than blood, more sacred than family. Among my people, Kethfer explained, to call someone battle brother is to say you would die for them. It is not something given lightly. Is that what we are now? Jake asked. Battle brothers. Kethfar met his eyes. You took claws meant for me. You bled for me. It's Jake Morrison of Earth. We are battle brothers now. Jake felt something warm spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the healing gel. For the first time since the crash, he was not thinking about rescue or going home. He was thinking about the alien warrior beside him and how much their friendship had come to mean. Outside their shelter, the night sounds of Kepler 44 to see continued. Predators hunted and prey hid, and the great forest lived its ancient life. Inside their small space, two beings from different worlds had found something that transcended the war between their species. Neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring, but they would face it together, as battle brothers, as friends. And, maybe, Jake thought as he drifted off to sleep, that was enough. The days after the fight with Velthor and Quindel were the hardest Kethfer had ever lived. He sat by their small fire each night, staring into the flames and saying nothing. Jake tried to talk to him, but the alien warrior barely responded. The weight of what he had done was crushing him. I killed my own kind, Kethfer said finally on the fifth night. His voice was hollow, empty of the strength Jake had grown used to hearing. In Scifi culture, there is no greater sign. I am worse than dead now. I am forgotten. Jake did not know what to say. He had seen soldiers struggle with killing before, but this was different. Kethfer had not just killed enemies in battle, he had fought against his own people to protect a human. No Scifi warrior had ever done such a thing. You saved my life, Jake said quietly. That has to count for something. 2 humans, perhaps, Kethfer replied. But I am not human. I am Scifi, or I was. Now I am nothing. Jake watched his friend suffer and felt helpless. The alien warrior, who had taught him to survive on this hostile world, was disappearing before his eyes. Kethfer still hunted and gathered food, still maintained their shelter, but he did it like a machine. The spirit that had made him who he was seemed to be dying. A week later, Jake decided to take action. He sat down beside Kethfer and began to talk about things they had never discussed. He told the alien about the nightmares he had after his first battle, when he was 19 and fresh out of training. How he had killed 6 enemy soldiers and then spent the next month throwing up every time he thought about it, my sergeant told me. Something that stayed with me, Jake said. He said that good soldiers feel bad when they kill. It means they are still human inside. The ones who stop feeling are the ones you have to worry about. Kethfer looked at him with those reflective eyes. But I did not kill strangers in battle. I killed warriors of my own blood. You killed 2 people who wanted to murder someone you cared about, Jake said firmly. That does not make you a traitor. That makes you loyal to what matters most. What matters most? Kethfer asked. Jake met his gaze without flinching. The people we choose to protect. The bonds we build with our own hands. Not the ones we are born into, but the ones we earn. That night, Kethfer told Jake about his childhood. How he had been trained from birth to be a warrior, like his father and grandfather before him. How he had never questioned the rightness of war, until he crashed on this world and met a human who showed him kindness instead of hatred. My cubs will grow up without knowing their father, Kethfer said. They will be told I died with honor in battle. It is better than the truth. Maybe, Jake said. Or maybe someday they will learn that their father chose friendship over hatred. Maybe they will be proud of that choice. As the weeks passed, their conversations grew deeper. Jake shared his doubts about the war, his fears about what he had become as a soldier. Kethfer talked about the poetry his mate had taught him, the songs his cubs sang when they thought no one was listening. They discovered that both their peoples told stories about heroes who sacrificed everything for what they believed in. On Earth, we have a saying, Jake told him one evening. It is better to die on your feet than live on your knees. Right. It is also better to be an honorable outcast than a loyal killer. Kethfer was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was stronger than it had been in weeks. Among my people, we have a similar saying. A warrior who fights only for orders is a slave. A warrior who fights for what he believes is free. Jake smiled. It was the first time he had seen the real Kethver since the fight. So what do you believe in? I believe that this war is wrong, Kethver said without hesitation. I believe that humans and Scifi are not natural enemies. I believe that. You and I prove that our peoples can be friends instead of killers. Then you are not nothing, Jake said. You are the first of something new. Their friendship deepened as the months passed. They no longer talked about rescue or going home. This world had become their world, this life, their life. Jake taught Kethver about human art and literature, describing paintings he had seen and books he had read. The alien warrior shared Scifi music and poetry, singing the ancient songs of his people in his rough but beautiful voice. They created new traditions together. Every seventh day, they would climb to the highest hill in their territory and watch the sun set over the alien forest. They would share their best food and tell stories of their past lives. These evenings became sacred to both of them, a ritual that belonged only to their friendship. Jake began to understand that what he felt for Kethver went beyond simple companionship. The alien warrior had become the most important person in his life. When Kethver was injured during a hunt, Jake felt panic unlike anything he had experienced in battle. When the alien recovered, Jake felt relief so strong it made his knees weak. Kethver seemed to feel the same way. He became protective of Jake in ways that went beyond their survival partnership. When the human was sick with fever from eating the wrong plant, Kethver stayed awake for 3 days straight to care for him. The alien's hands were gentle as they applied medicine and brought water. "Why do you do this?" Jake asked during his recovery. "I am not your responsibility." "Yes, you are," Kethver replied simply. "You are my battle brother. Your life is as important to me as my own." Jake realized that he felt the same way. Somewhere in the months of survival and shared danger, his feelings had grown into something he had never expected. Love, perhaps, though he was not sure that word applied to a friendship between species. All he knew was that the thought of losing Kethver was unbearable. They were discussing plans for winter when Kethver's armor displays suddenly came to life. The alien warrior went very still, reading the information that flowed across his screens. Jake could not understand the Scifi symbols, but he could read his friend's expression. "What is it?" Jake asked, though he already suspected the answer. Kethver said quietly. "Multiple contacts in orbit, both human and Scifi signatures." Jake felt his stomach drop. After all these months, rescue had finally come. But looking at Kethver's face, he realized that rescue might be the worst thing that could happen to them. Their two peoples were still at war. Any rescue operation would see them as enemies who needed to be separated. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. Kethver checked his displays again. "Landing craft will reach the surface within hours. Search patterns suggest they know approximately where we are." Jake stood up and began pacing their small shelter. His mind raced through possibilities, none of them good, if human forces found them first. They would try to arrest or kill Kethver. If Scifi forces arrived first, they would execute both of them as traitors. "We could run," Jake said. "Hide deeper in the forest until they give up looking." "For how long?" Kethver asked. "Weeks? Months? They will not stop searching until they find us or confirm we are dead." Jake knew his friend was right. This was the end of their time together, one way or another. The thought made him feel hollow inside, like something vital had been torn out of his chest. It found something precious on this hostile world, and now the war was coming to take it away. "I want you to know," Jake said suddenly, "that these months with you have been the best of my life. Whatever happens next, I will never forget what we had here." Kethver stood and placed one of his hands on Jake's shoulder. The gesture was gentle despite the deadly claws. "Nor will I, battle brother. You have given me a gift more valuable than life itself. You have shown me who I truly am." Outside their shelter, the sound of approaching aircraft grew louder. Their time was running out, and both of them knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Jake made the decision that would change everything. While Kethver monitored the approaching ships, Jake pulled out a small device he had been working on for weeks. It was built from parts of both their crashed ships, a communication unit that could reach both human and Scifi frequencies. "What are you doing?" Cuthbert asked, watching Jake connect the final components. "Something crazy," Jake replied. His hands were steady as he worked, though his heart was racing. "Might get us both killed. But if we are going to die anyway, we might as well die trying to make a difference." Jake activated the device and began transmitting on all frequencies. His message was simple and direct, broadcast to both fleets approaching the planet. He identified himself and Cuthbert. He told their story, how they had survived together, fought together, become friends, how their experience proved that humans and Scifi were not natural enemies. "This is Lieutenant Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Force," he said into the transmitter. "I am alive on the surface of Kepler 442c. With Scifi warrior, Cuthbert, we have been allies for 7 months. We request immediate diplomatic contact between both fleets." Cuthbert stared at him. "You are asking them to talk instead of fight?" "I am asking them to listen," Jake said. "To see what we have learned down here, that this war is built on lies and fear instead of real differences." The response came quickly. Multiple voices on different channels, all demanding answers. Human commanders wanted to know if Jake was being held prisoner. Scifi officers asked if Cuthbert had been tortured into compliance. Neither side believed that cooperation was possible. Major Ryan Foster's voice cut through the chaos. "Morrison, this is Falcon Leader. Confirm your status. Are you being coerced?" "Negative, sir," Jake replied. "I am speaking freely. Cuthbert is my friend and ally. He has saved my life multiple times. I request permission to address both fleets jointly." There was a long silence. When Foster spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. "Jake, you have been missing for 7 months. You may be suffering from stress or alien influence. They're coming to extract you immediately." On the Scifi channel, a harsh voice spoke in accented English. "Human Morrison, I am war leader, Thanipos. If the traitor Cuthbert still lives, he will face execution for his crimes against the Empire. You will be returned to your people unharmed, if you surrender him to us." Jake looked at Cuthbert, who was listening to both conversations through his armor's translation system. The alien warrior's face showed no fear, only a sad acceptance of what seemed inevitable. "Both fleets listen to me," Jake said into the transmitter. "You are about to make the same mistake that started this war. You are choosing to see enemies where you could see friends. Cuthbert and I prove that our peoples can work together, can trust each other, can care about each other. Do not waste this chance. Morrison, step away from the alien," Foster ordered. "That is a direct command." "I refuse," Jake said clearly. "Cuthbert is under my protection, just as I am under his. Stand together, or not at all." The first landing craft appeared over the trees 20 minutes later. 3 human dropships and 2 Scifi transports, facing each other across the clearing where Jake and Cuthbert waited. Both sides had weapons trained on the other. One wrong move would start a battle that neither could win. Jake and Cuthbert stood in the center of the clearing, between the two forces. They were close enough to touch, presenting a united front to both their peoples. Jake could see the shock on human faces as they realized he was defending an alien. The Scifi looked equally confused by their warrior's alliance with a human. Major Foster stepped out of the lead dropship, his weapon drawn but not aimed. He was older than Jake remembered, with new lines around his eyes that spoke of months, of war and loss. "Jake, what the hell has happened to you?" Foster asked. "This creature is the enemy. It has probably been manipulating you this whole time. This creature has a name," Jake said firmly. "His name is Cuthbert. He is a warrior, a father, a poet, and my battle brother. He has shown me more honor and loyalty than most humans I have. Served with." War leader Thanipos emerged from the Scifi transport. He was massive, even for his species, covered in scars that told of many battles. His forearms ended in claws that looked like they could cut through steel. "Cuthbert of the 3rd Battle Group," Thanipos said in English, his voice filled with disgust. You have brought shame upon your lineage and dishonor upon the empire. Kneel and accept your punishment." "I kneel to no one who calls my battle brother an enemy," Kethfer replied. His voice was calm, but his stance was ready for combat. "Found more honor on this world than I ever knew in service to the empire." The standoff stretched taut like a wire about to snap. Weapons were raised on both sides. Jake could see fingers moving toward triggers. In seconds, this clearing would become a battlefield that would destroy any chance for peace. "Wait!" Jake called out. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small wooden carving. It was a figure that combined human and Scifi features, something he had made during their long evenings by the fire. "Major Foster, War Leader Thanapos, I want you both to see this." He held up the carving so both sides could see it clearly. "I made this with my own hands, using tools that Kethfer taught me to make. It represents what we could become together. Not human, not Scifi, but something new, something better." Foster lowered his weapon slightly. "Jake, that is just a piece of wood. It does not change the fact that we are at war. Wars end," Jake said. "The question is how they end. Do they end with more death and hatred, or do they end with understanding and peace? Kethfer and I are living proof that peace is possible." Kethfer stepped forward and pulled something from his armor. It was a bracelet made of woven metal, intricate and beautiful. Jake recognized it as a Scifi warrior's bond bracelet, given only to the most trusted allies. "Among my people," Kethfer said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "this is given to one who has proven his honor in battle. Jake Morrison has earned this through his courage, his loyalty, and his willingness to see past the lies that divide our peoples." He placed the bracelet on Jake's wrist. The metal was warm from Kethfer's body heat. Jake felt tears in his eyes as he understood the significance of the gesture. In front of both armies, Kethfer was claiming him as family. Jake pulled out his own gift, a dog tag he had worn since his first day of military service. He placed the chain around Kethfer's neck, letting the metal tag rest against the alien's chest armor. "This represents my oath as a soldier," Jake said. "To protect the innocent and defend what is right. I give it to you because you embody those values better than anyone I have ever known." The silence stretched across the clearing. Both armies watched as human and alien stood together, wearing each other's symbols of honor. Finally, Major Foster spoke. "This is madness," he said, but his voice had lost its harsh edge. "Even if what you say is true, how do we convince our governments? How do we make them believe?" War Leader Thanapos made a sound that might have been agreement. "The High Command will never accept this. They will call it weakness or deception." "Then we start small," Jake said. "We start with this moment, this place, these people. We start with the truth that Kethfer and I represent. That enemies can become friends, that friendship can become family." 6 months later, Jake stood before a joint commission of human and Scifi officials. The conference room, on the neutral space station, was divided down the middle, with representatives from both governments sitting in careful formation. The questions had been going on for hours. Lieutenant Morrison asked Admiral Catherine Blake, the chief human negotiator, "You claim that your experience with this alien warrior proves our species can coexist peacefully, but how do we know this was not an isolated incident?" Jake looked across the room to where Kethfer sat with the Scifi delegation. The alien warrior wore simple clothes instead of his battle armor, but he still carried himself with quiet dignity. Their eyes met, and Kethfer nodded slightly. "Because we are not the only ones anymore," Jake said. "In the 6 months since our rescue, 17 other incidents have been reported. Human and Scifi soldiers working together when circumstances force cooperation. Enemies becoming allies when they had the chance to see each other as people instead of targets." Out a datapad and began reading. Corporal Martinez and Warrior Velinosh stranded together on Rigel 7. They built a shelter and shared resources for 3 weeks. Lieutenant Chang and Sub-Commander Korthfell, trapped in a damaged station during an asteroid storm. They repaired the life support systems working as a team. The list went on. Each incident was small, but together they painted a picture of something larger. A growing understanding that the war was not inevitable, that peace was possible if both sides were willing to try. These stories prove that what happened to Kethver and me was not unique, Jake continued. It was natural. When you strip away the uniforms and the propaganda, we are not so different. We both love our families. We both want to live in peace. We both dream of a better future for our children. The commission voted that day to establish the first official diplomatic contact between humans and Scifi in 5 years. It was a small step, but it was a beginning.